currently a Senior Director of Managed Security Services at NTT Data. I primarily manage our identity access management practice. ZTNA falls under some of my responsibilities. I also am an adjunct professor at UT Dallas, where I teach various cybersecurity courses to master's students in the School of Management. I'm also affiliated with a number of other things such as InfraGuard, North Texas chapter, on the advisory board for College Cybersecurity program. I also am a faculty sponsor for UTD Cybersecurity Club, and I do mentor a number of other students. So, Zero Trust has been a word which has been thrown around since last few years, and the world has shifted more and more towards Zero Trust, right? So what does Zero Trust mean? Zero Trust simply means you don't take things for granted because you authenticated somebody previous time. Doesn't mean they are good to go for all throughout. So what you do is you continuously, every time somebody tries to access, you are validating they are who they say they are and they have the right access, right? Various technologies which you can do to implement an end-to-end Zero Trust, and we'll cover that a little bit. So this will be a part of our Zero Trust series. So we will go over various things. Now, Zero Trust is easier said than done, right? It's okay to say that we will go ahead and implement Zero Trust, but there are various building blocks that you'll need to secure so that you can have an end-to-end Zero Trust solution. Today we are going to focus on the network access. So some of you might be aware of the term called network segmentation, right? So what does network segmentation do? You're basically slicing and dicing your network so that you have it segmented and people are not able to access the various parts of the segmented network. You have next generation firewalls. Obviously the multi-factor authentication. So one of the things which I kind of missed to say is Zero Trust is, the tagline is never trust, always verify. So you do not trust anyone by implicit default. You make sure that people are able to prove who they are, and that's for your own good, right? The last thing you want is somebody who was prior authenticated, they got into your network and they're able to laterally or non-laterally move within the network, and that traversal can basically hurt you because they are able to access things which they are not supposed to be accessing. So you have identity access management which gets implemented on Zero Trust. You implement secure web gateways. Companies like Palo Alto, companies like Zscaler have implemented secure web gateways. You have endpoint protection platforms. You implement encryption, DLP, and the last one is the Zero Trust network access, which is our topic for today. So, as I was mentioning, Zero Trust is typically done you need to have an impact as a whole, but they are technically the 5 pillars that you're trying to protect. Identity, devices, networks, applications and workloads, and data. Now, these days, your identity takes you across the organization, across your partners sometimes, but you need to have a combination to have Zero Trust. You need to have, if you're accessing from a particular device, your device needs to be authenticated. You're accessing from a network, you need to be tagged to that particular network so that when you're accessing, it's not like, say you're supposed to be based out of US, but you're accessing from India. So if the network is showing as India or some other country, then I think there is something which is not right. Your device needs to be a trusted device. So some of these things are put in place when you go through the Zero Trust access. You are authenticating some of these things. You're ensuring you're accessing from a trusted device, you're ensuring you're coming in from a trusted identity. These days, if all of you are aware, we are creating passkeys on your devices. So your passkeys are created based on a particular device and it is stored. So every time you go, your authentication, your verification becomes much faster. Because last thing you want is zero trust slowing you down, right? You're in the middle of your thing. You need to be seamlessly authenticated so that you continue to move forward without worrying about that continuous authentication and authorization will slow you down. So these are the 5 pillars, as I mentioned: identity, devices, networks, applications and workload, and data. So what is zero trust network access? It's a security model that requires strict verification for every user and every device attempting to access resources. You need to ensure that no one is trusted by default. As I said, no implicit default trust, right? Whether you are inside or outside the network. You need to be able to prove yourself that you are who you say you are, right? It also provides you the secure, adaptive, and segmented access to the applications and resources, right? You are verifying explicitly using least privilege, and you're basically assuming a breach. You're acting as if the breach has happened, and that's why when the breach has happened, you still have to access your network, you still have to access your resources, and you should be able to do that when the breach has happened, right? So ZTNA continuously verifies every access request. Doesn't matter where you're trying to connect from. Doesn't matter which user is trying to connect. Independent of the device, but every time you need to be authenticated, you need to be authorized to move forward. Every user, device or network segment is a potential threat. That's the assume breach mindset. Everyone is a potential threat, and you want to make sure you're enforcing strong identity-centric access controls at every stage. So, zero trust application, what does it do? It hides your apps and services from being discovered. So somebody who's trying to access your environment, they should not be able to go find and search the devices, search the systems on the network. They should not be able to, unless you are truly authorized, you should not have access. A lot of times people in the companies try to save time and money by granting more access to users, to more access to devices than they need to have. Okay? So one of the biggest things that Zero Trust Network Access is trying to do is make sure you are no longer allowing people based on their past history, based on their past credentials, that they, just because they did it past few times doesn't mean they should be able to do it now. Because people's roles change, people's jobs change, people's trust level changes every step of the way, and you need to make sure when somebody's trying to get in, they are authenticated for today. What happened yesterday doesn't matter. Today and tomorrow matters. More so today. You're authenticating right now, you're granting somebody the access, right? What if somebody got the access accidentally, even for say 5 minutes? They can go in and do the damage. So you need to make sure the Zero Trust Network Access is implemented in such a way that people are not able to get in. So Zero Trust, and like I said, there's also an application access, and these 5 pillars need to work together to ensure an end-to-end Zero Trust connectivity. So you're not allowing access to the entire network, right? So automatically you have lowered the impact of a breach. If you only have access to a portion of the network which you need to have, even if you got an elevated access, you will not be able to go and traverse across multiple things. So you're restricting that. How many of you are familiar with what VPNs do? Some of you might have been using VPNs in the past, right? ZTNA is an attempt to replace VPNs, especially in this era where a lot of people are still continuing to work remotely. Hybrid work models are becoming more and more important because a lot of companies are now enforcing 2 days, 3 days in office, the remaining days remote. So if that's what is happening, you need to make sure that your user experience and security doesn't get compromised if you are working from office, if you are working from your home, if you are working from a library or a coffee shop. Wherever you are working from, your experience needs to be the same, your security needs to be the same. So VPNs provide broad network protection, right? But ZTNA is a comprehensive solution which provides more granular control to the organizations. Right? Granular control means you are able to provide access at a much more granular level, and you are able to restrict access at a much more granular level. So achieving a full-fledged zero trust architecture takes time, but ZTNA is an easy start. It's something that we can get this off the ground, right? So all the access requests to applications, resources, and assets need to be in a denial unless the trust is established. ZTNA applies the same policy to the access gateways. A lot of companies are now putting in access gateways in the front to provide the insulation layer. As I said, zero trust philosophy is what? Never trust, always verify. Traditionally, network used to be the perimeter. You could restrict your network and people would be restricted. That landscape has changed. Now people are working from anywhere. They have their data anywhere in the cloud. So all those things add up to the complexity, and we need to make sure the user experience and security both remain solid when people access from anywhere. Right? So earlier network perimeters were secured by verifying user identity only the first time user or device entered into an environment. If you got access to your building, you were verified one time, and after that you don't need to go through a continuous verification. Now your networks are built around micro perimeters. Micro perimeters are what? They're something which surround your specific assets, such as data, such as applications, such as services, sometimes called microservices. Segmentation gateways. Authentication gets defined not just by the user identity, but by parameters such as device, location, timestamp, recent activity, and description of the request. So as I was mentioning earlier, right, you have a resource who's supposed to be working out of United States time zone, and you see that that resource is working and connecting from India time zone. Then if the right monitoring is there, it will be flagged, and somebody might be asking, hey, why is this person working from a completely different geographic location? And the answer could be because there is some emergency, there is some need, traveling on work, all those things, completely understandable. But there has to be boundaries. How long is this person going to work from that time zone, right? What are the devices that they are using? If a user had a particular device which was authorized or authenticated, and then when they are traveling, they did not carry that device, and now you're using a non-trusted device. Non-trusted device adds more complexity. Right? So authentication rules protect networks from unauthorized users. Right? Grant approved users specific privileges for which they have an immediate need. Keyword is approved users are granted only the specific privileges for which they have an immediate need. Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because if somebody had any specific questions on a particular slide, I can take that right now. So how do you create a zero trust network? Right? So like you mentioned, right? Zero trust network is a framework. It's not like you turn a switch on and say, okay, I'm zero trust network. Right? It's an approach. It's a mindset that you apply to security. Right? The following 5 processes that you would do to typically get into creating your own zero trust network. The biggest thing is to begin with, identify assets. A lot of times people do not know what assets, be it software, be it hardware, be it system, be it humans. What are the assets that you have? And when I say users or human resources, sometimes somebody has got some accesses left and they were not deprovisioned. Your hardware could be something which was already flagged as a vulnerable system and it is still on your network, right? So you have to first get an inventory of your assets and make assessments about proprietary data and intellectual property. Some of you, if you are working ever, you know that a lot of companies have SMDB where you keep this inventory, right? But that asset management stuff is as good as what was created first day. A lot of times people are not continuously updating for the reasons unknown to them, and then the syncing of the assets isn't right. So when you do the inventory, and you have to do this continuous inventory of assets, and you need to make sure what accesses they have, who's accessing proprietary data, who's accessing intellectual property. Try and identify the scope of your assets which can cause damage, that could lead to your attack surface. You verify which devices and which users have access to this. So intrusions are initiated through a device that has been spoofed, right? So as I said, to maintain zero trust, devices and users must verify they are who or what they say they are, right? Then you have capability to do some mapping of workflows. Define who will access your asset, when they need to access them, how and why they need to be granted the access, right? If it's a workflow driven, then obviously the workflow, you don't want the workflow to fail all the time, right? So the workflow needs to be substantiated with the information that they need before the workflow gets triggered and somebody can be granted the access, right? You want to define and automate your policies, right? You want to know which assessment, you did your assessment, found some results, and now based on that, you've defined your policies for authentication. You need to know what metadata is created. You want to know whenever these processes need to be automated, you're able to automate. And lastly, test, monitor, and maintain. As I said, zero trust approach is not a one and done kind of an approach. You have to do things like threat modeling, right? So you want to build the zero trust framework in such a way that the impact on productivity is minimal and hypothetical security threats are neutralized. When I say hypothetical security threats, it's based on maybe you did a tabletop exercise, you identified some scenarios, some security threats. So by doing a full-blown zero trust framework implementation or framework rollout, you are able to do threat modeling. You verify if those threats are being addressed, if threats are being rectified, the risk is getting lowered. These are the activities which will help tremendously when it comes to ensuring what kind of a zero trust approach companies need to adapt. From an architecture point of view, I would like to discuss about zero trust network architecture. Right. Again, this is something for you to take a look at it. On the left, you see the two users. One is coming from an unmanaged device, the other one's coming from a managed device. And you have your customer firewall, and then you have your ZTNA connectors, which will get connected to the various applications, right? So what is the difference between your ZTNA and VPN, right? I'll start with the right side first. VPN is something what we are all used to be doing. Since the last 25-30 years, we've been connecting to VPN, even as early as sometimes in the early 90s and all, people were connecting to VPN using a dial-up connection. Once that VPN was established, then only you could access certain system resources on the other side, right? So VPN used to focus on your authorization. VPN verifies users as point of entry of a private corporate network. And what you do use for that? You basically authenticate yourself using a particular login and password, and your authorization grants you access to which resources that you have. Then you have your accessibility, right? When the users are able to log into a VPN, they are granted complete access to the entire network, as long as those boundaries are set. And once somebody gets into a VPN, they are a part of that virtual private network and they are in a trusted zone. From a speed wise, VPN is definitely slower than ZTNA, because VPNs go through data center. They have a standard centralized server which gets connected, and then the things are being established. VPNs provide users full access to a network's resources, which means the entire network could be exposed if somebody knows how to get into the network, how to elevate the privileges, so they are able to control your network. On a different note, ZTNA solutions perform continuous background monitoring to adapt access levels so that we can get a good authorization mechanism in place. ZTNA solutions are connecting authorized users directly to an application rather than to the network. So when you are connecting directly to applications, and doesn't mean you connect to all the applications in your app library, right? Only to those applications they are authorized to access on a need-to-know based policies. So VPN is where it would connect. Once you connect to the network, then you are able to go ahead and do that. Zero Trust doesn't give you that all or nothing kind of a privilege. Zero Trust helps you to see if you have connected users who can directly connect to the applications, right? You don't want to make sure that we are granting somebody access to the entire network when they don't need to have. So that is what an advantage over VPN is. You don't need to have someone have the access to the entire network because they wanted to connect to couple of applications. Obviously, ZTNA solutions are much faster because they connect users directly to applications instead of going through a middle server or so, which is acting like a network controller. And in VPN, you end up connecting first to the data center, and once you have connected, that's when you are able to go further. ZTNA restricts you. You can connect to applications directly. Application could be hosted in-house, remotely, anywhere, and you are able to do so. Right? Resources can also be on the cloud, and you don't require a local network. So all that adds to faster access. Obviously, when teams have been doing, they also need to make sure that we have the network access is something which you don't need to grant. So that's why VPNs are no, because VPNs are doing all or nothing type of a solution. So you need to make sure if somebody tries to connect, they only get access to the application that they need to connect to. Right? And the last one, since ZTNA has been limiting the user connections to specific applications, you are anyways restricting access to the things which they don't need to have access to. So that way, Zero Trust Network Security is already providing a better security by lowering the risk, and you're building security resilience in the right way more than the VPNs need to have. So at this point, I'd like to pause and possibly take some of your questions. Again, what you're trying to do, but based on where the modern world is, Zero Trust Network Access is definitely a better option than VPN. Because VPN, you're granting access to somebody to the entire network as long as they are authenticated onto the VPN. But in Zero Trust Network Access, you are restricting their access to specific applications. You can have a lot more granular control. So definitely Zero Trust Network Access is a more solid solution. There is no ZTNA site for more learning. It's a framework, right? So like I said, the companies like Zscaler, Palo Alto, number of them have implemented some sort of a. So I would suggest try and attend some of the more informative seminars and those kinds of things. So that will help you augment your knowledge of ZTNA. You don't have it's not a product that you can go and say, I'll buy this or I'll read this, but it's more of a framework. It's more of a kind of an architecture that you put in place. So there is no site as such, but yes, you have to follow multiple sites to understand the principles. You could, because like I said, it's a concept. It's not a product implementation. You don't need to have a modernized application. It's a concept. As long, the implementation will change how you are doing it, right? But the concept needs to be applied. The biggest concept that you're verifying here is never trust, always verify, right? You don't need to, as long as you have, there might be more building blocks which you might end up putting in place for a legacy application. But as long as you are able to put that structure in place, you should be able to do that. Yes. First, understanding your network, right? If you want to understand and start implementing your ZTNA, you need to know what are the various pillars. What does your network do? What is the use case that you're trying to solve, right? I would strongly suggest getting some help in terms of first understanding what are the things that you're trying to solve. What do you have? Start off with your inventory. These are the things that you have. What assets within your inventory have access to the proprietary information, what access needs to be controlled. So those are the types of things which you need to do. You need to put like an architecture in place so that once somebody is trying to connect, they are actually addressing the framework and not a product. So it's important that people understand the difference, that ZTNA is not it's not a product that you can go from the shelf, you can put it in place. This is more about conceptual, it's about a logical architecture that you can have to have this sort of a framework put in place. So it is definitely going to change, but like how is it going to change? I think we still need to find out. There might be more agents which could be implemented, like how you are doing earlier in case of VPN, you are establishing the connection with the data center. Right now, for each application, you could have a separate agent which could be communicating with the application to implement zero trust network access. Using trusted devices, because some of those things by using trusted devices, by creating the passkeys, etc., you minimize your authentication, or I wouldn't say minimize the authentication. Authentication needs to be there because that is the principle of ZTNA, but what you need to do is the authentication becomes faster, it becomes more seamless. If you have your registered devices that you're trying to access from, then authentication becomes a lot more seamless, a lot more streamlined. No, like I said, there are various pillars, right? As we discussed, I don't know if you attended the whole thing or not, but there are various pillars. There's network, there's devices, there's identity, there's application, and then there's data. So this is something, in order to get the full benefit of zero trust, you'll have to pretty much implement various different solutions. Now, are there some solutions? Yes, there are solutions which can work on the smaller bits and pieces, but at the end of the day, it has to be a logical linking of them, which will give you a full-blown zero trust solution. Yeah, how do you mitigate? As long as you understand and try and protect, as long as you try and use registered devices, you use your multi-factor authentication. Some of those lower hanging fixes will help you protect across the entire ecosystem, which could be zero trust. MS Azure is a cloud-based platform. Zero trust network access is a framework. It's not a platform. That is the main difference. You can implement a zero trust network access solution for an Azure platform, but not the other way around. So I'll counter this question by asking, how can IT and network security, right, make sure everything is protected in your environment? Back in the days when IT and network security were basically controlling everything, they were the ones who were granting access. But if some of you have not come across IT or network resources who did not really understand what was needed specifically from a implementation point of view, and they would grant access to people who could abuse that access knowingly or unknowingly. So what zero trust network access is making sure that some of your mishaps which were caused by the IT and the network security guys, because they were too busy working on things, they ended up granting extra access. Zero trust network access will try to mitigate by not allowing them to run around freely. So I already answered the second part, but the first one, what is zero trust network access architecture? Again, like I said, it is where different end-to-end pillars, we are calling this 5 pillars, right? They are each implementing zero trust. So when you are doing an architecture, and I did have the slide on the architecture, where if you are implementing the architecture, you are actually going in and ensuring that individually all your devices are protected, all your application accesses are limited, and all those things can definitely help in ensuring that you have designed an architecture which is not a free for all, right? You are actually restricting access at every step of the way, thus having a lot more streamlined overall architecture. Yeah, again, I won't be able to provide any white paper or so. Right? There are lots of them available on the internet. There are lots of successful implementations of zero trust, but there are a lot more failed implementations of zero trust because people get complacent. People go ahead and get something in there, and then they think that they've achieved full zero trust. One of the biggest things is when you think that you have achieved full zero trust, that means you have not achieved zero trust, because that means you have said that you are complacent and you've got everything that you needed to protect. That is where the problem starts, right? Because the biggest thing is you cannot say that, yeah, I'm zero trust certified. Just using the word certified because everyone loves to use the word certified. There is no such thing as I'm zero trust certified or I have achieved my zero trust. It's like in the world of cybersecurity, right? We say that there is no happily ever after, or there is no happy ending when it comes to achieving the cybersecurity complacence, cybersecurity confidence. That, oh yeah, I've protected everything and I'm all good. So that is why you are assuming breach. So you are continuously bolstering your network access by various ways and making sure that you achieve the zero trust network access part of it. You are not going in and saying that because my devices are protected, I'm more protected. Yes, there is a good chance you have lowered your risk, but doesn't mean that you are fully protected. The threats of yesterday are not the threats of today and tomorrow, right? So the opportunity wise, as long as you're staying put with it, as long as you are logically accepting the fact that what are you trying to achieve with ZTNA, right? You are trying to achieve a level of confidence that you have checks and balances put in place. So if somebody tries to access your network, you have basically put enough challenges for them, even enough controls in them, so that somebody is able to get inside the network, but their ability is limited to what damage they can cause. So as long as you're doing your due diligence, you have ensured that you have a framework in place, and you don't need to worry about keeping it up. But having said that, there continues to be new threats which come in. So what you have designed your system thinking about particular levels of threats, maybe that threat landscape has changed. So you need to continuously adapt yourselves so that your network is ready to counter any challenges posed to it. Okay? So when you say how to handle cybersecurity, I'm trying to understand the question, but if I understand it correctly, you're trying to say that what to do when you're attacked with cybersecurity. If you're attacked, then you need to make sure that you are countering and putting every single control. See, let's use a simple example. If you are in a home, somebody tried to break inside and they try to come in through a window. Next time, will you protect that window or will you not protect that window, saying I've already been attacked through this window, so why do I need to protect it again? Right? So sometimes if you are under an attack, you need to first make sure you stop the attack from reaching further, right? in a typical incident response life cycle, right, you have containment, eradication, and recovery as the 3 steps. You first contain your problem from happening further, then you eradicate, finding out the cause of the culprit, and then you recover. You don't start recovering first and then do the containment and eradication later. I think the biggest thing is you need to understand when you're wanting to work in cybersecurity, what you did yesterday doesn't matter. What you're going to do today and tomorrow matters. So being aware of what is going on in the world of cyber is very, very critical. People need to understand the threat landscape continues to change on a daily basis, on a hourly basis. So please make sure that you are understanding what your threats are and try to equate them with the risk to see that, okay, I have particular threats. These threats cause X amount of risk, so I need to control. And when I say control, you put the technical controls, and the other thing is you also need to make sure you limit your exposure. So it has to be done on both sides. One, you may have accidentally opened it up and somebody might be sneaking in and doing things. So you need to first make sure that one, when you are assuming breach, if there was a hole that you found, you plug that hole and you make it stronger than what it was. So I think the landscape, I'm absolutely certain that some of you guys will go on to be good cybersecurity professionals, because if you start understanding what really means, and like Shilpa mentioned, there are lots of good other courses available. Try to strengthen your knowledge, try to make sure that you are getting your theory knowledge along with the practical experience that you will get.